Everybody knows at this point that people being locked up and spending our tax dollars to have people locked up for simple marijuana possession, no violence, none of that stuff, is ludicrous.
If there's discussions, that's how laws ultimately are passed, is there has to be discussions first. Hi, welcome to another episode of United Cannabis Club News. My name's Angelica. Thank you so much for watching. Today we are going to discuss this letter. It was submitted to President Biden by a man named Weldon Angelos. Weldon Angelos is a former convicted marijuana offender who was in prison for 13 years. He was able to get out of prison due to President Donald Trump giving him a pardon. So he was released, and now he has launched his own organization where he advocates for people that are currently incarcerated for marijuana nonviolent criminal offenses. So he can speak to his own experience and help other people that are in similar situations. So he actually got a ton of signatures from celebrities, and he drew up a letter. He sent it over to the President Biden administration. Now I'm going to go ahead and read part of the letter. If you want to read the entire letter, go head over to our website, unitedcannabis.club. But let me go ahead and read the intro. Okay, so this was submitted to the White House, President Joseph R. Biden Jr., September 14th of this year. It says, regarding pardon for federal marijuana offenders. Dear Mr. President, we write in support of your strong leadership on criminal justice reform in the United States. We share your goals of a more just and fair society that lives up to the promises made in the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. We believe, as you do, that real and lasting public safety can be achieved by fulfilling these promises. For these reasons, we urge you to exercise your authority as the chief law enforcement officer and the sole decision maker on clemency under the U.S. Constitution to grant a full, complete, and unconditional pardon to all persons subject to federal criminal or civil enforcement on the basis of nonviolent marijuana offenses. As you know, the federal war on drugs, and he puts war on drugs in quotes, the war on drugs has crushed many souls and countless futures, while spreading intolerable levels of mistrust and dysfunction between minority communities and those sworn to protect them. Although the war impacts individuals of all races, the effects of drug prohibition, from surveillance and arrest to trial and conviction to incarceration and re-entry into society, are felt more keenly by the poor, the powerless, and people of color. Reckoning with these harms is a critical civil rights issue, which must proceed with what Dr. King memorably described as the fierce urgency of now. This resolve is witnessed today in both red and blue states, from coast to coast, as the American people call for an end to marijuana prohibition. Whatever one thinks of other drugs and other defendants, incarcerating marijuana offenders in federal prisons is a misuse of our nation's resources and grossly hypocritical, given that a clear majority of Americans oppose marijuana prohibition and half admit to using the drug during their lifetime. It also stands against the arc of history and the principle of federalism. Nearly 3/4 of the states have now abandoned the federal government blanket criminal ban in favor of safe, regulated legal access to marijuana for adults and or those with qualifying medical conditions. The harms of incarceration are obvious, but the pains of federal marijuana convictions transcend prison walls, making it more difficult for someone to get a job, access affordable housing, and receive an education. A conviction can forever limit an individual's constitutional rights and can put the American dream further out of reach for an entire family. Enough is enough. No one should be locked up in prison for marijuana. No one should continue to bear the scarlet letter of a federal conviction for marijuana offenses. We know you share our concerns. In November 2019, during a Democratic Democratic primary debate, you stated, "I think we should decriminalize marijuana, period. And I think anyone who has a record should be let out of jail, their records expunged, completely zeroed out. On the eve of your election, you reaffirm my commitment to you, the American people, to decriminalize marijuana and automatically expunge prior marijuana convictions. You were right then, and you remain right today. Relief from the federal war on marijuana would not only be just, it would also be good policy by advancing public safety and economic prosperity. A general pardon poses a low risk to the American people by expunging records and releasing the last remaining prisoners of federal marijuana prohibition. Those who will have their sentences commuted comprise a small percentage of the federal prison population and are incarcerated only for nonviolent marijuana offenses. All other beneficiaries of a categorical pardon represent an even lower risk, since these people are already living peacefully among their neighbors. A general pardon of all federal marijuana offenders would also be consistent with the Constitution and past practices. Presidents from both political parties have issued categorical grants of clemency when circumstances warranted it. In 1974, President Ford established a program of conditional clemency for Selective Service Act violators. In 1977, President Carter issued a categorical pardon to all Selective Service Act violators, closing the book on a costly and painful war. You have the power to do the same for the federal war on marijuana. We appreciate that the Biden-Sanders Task Force recommendations speak to these issues, and we recognize the expungement of harmful convictions is an important part of the healing process. By your act of constitutional grace, a general clemency will send a clear and powerful message to our country that our country is truly taking a new course on criminal justice policy and practice. Thank you for your leadership in reforming criminal justice and advancing public safety in America today. Sincerely, Weldon Angelos and Eric Lindma. And joining us today is a special guest. This is attorney Ted Sieving, weighing in on the letter that I just read regarding a request to President Biden for clemency written by Weldon Angelos, founder of Mission Green. So, I looked up the response that President Biden has to this letter, and actually there's a report that what Biden's next step, or what he wants to have or do for this, he wants people to apply for clemency.
Right. So his response was basically, put your name in the system to get clemency, which, I mean, that's a fair response. Mm-hmm. Like, he can't grant them clemency if they don't fill out the paperwork, right? Which, is a pain, but I mean, yeah. But I also think that's a very weak response. I mean, that's sort of the bare minimum. He's not saying I'll grant you clemency. He's not saying no, but he's saying apply. Well, sure. I agree. Apply. But, the letter asks him to grant people clemency in a way that would be a sweeping restoration of people's rights. And it's an opportunity that I think he should take, because, it would be a lot more popular than he thinks it will, in my opinion. Because everybody knows at this point that people being locked up and spending our tax dollars to have people locked up for simple marijuana possession, no violence, none of that stuff, is ludicrous.
If there's discussions, that's how laws ultimately are passed, is there has to be discussions first. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely a good sign, but obviously the process is probably going to be slow, just as everything else within the Department of Justice goes.
I'm glad that United Cannabis Club is trying to bring some attention to this and push it forward, because I pay attention to this stuff, but it's not something that I can put as much energy into as I'd like to. And this guy Weldon, he's been there, done that. My roommate Jay, who
We will have her on the show at some point.
That's true. She's been there, done that. She was in prison for possession of an ounce of marijuana in Florida. And, I won't tell her story. I'll let her tell her own story. It's a great and a very shocking and disappointing story of our so-called justice system. But, it's having someone in prison devastates a family. So,
Yeah, and this article also mentions that, let me just read this paragraph. It says, Biden has faced criticism from drug policy reform advocates who've grown frustrated that he's yet to make good on campaign promises. This is part of his campaign promise for decriminalizing marijuana. While his opposition to adult use legalization remains a challenge on its own, they feel he should at least take steps to enact modest reform. And he also campaigned on expunging prior cannabis records and respecting the rights of states to set their own laws. However, since he's taken office, he's fired his own White House staffers over marijuana and sought to extend a budget provision that has blocked Washington, D.C. from legalizing cannabis sales.
Well, the bottom line is, in this letter, they quote his own words where he promises to decriminalize it and to not only that, but to let people out and expunge their records. So, it's really disappointing. He's done a lot of good things, but he has some weird blind spot when it comes to weed, that he's just stuck in this old reefer madness, world. And, it's time to change.
Yes. So we applaud Weldon for, putting this letter together. He gathered, 50 signatures from celebrities ranging. Drake has signed this letter. Shout out to Baby Bash. He signed the letter. Little Baby. He's also got people in sports that have signed it. Deon Sanders. But if you want to check out all the celebrities that are actually supporting this, you can check out the full letter on our website, unitedcannabis.club. And support our nonprofit as well, because this is what we're focused on as well, is helping minorities navigate, how they can become official business owners in the space, because it's really a lot harder for minorities in general to start a business because they have a harder time getting funded. So even more so in the cannabis space. So we're also advocating for minorities and also for nonviolent marijuana convicted offenders. We want to also help them navigate how to undo the sentences that have been applied to them due to outdated laws. So check out our website, send a donation, and that will go to good use for us to help these people that are dealing with consequences that are super outdated and need to change. And President Biden has the power to do that, and we hope that he will make good on his campaign promise.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thank you. So tune in next time, guys. Follow us on Instagram, and we'll see you at the next one.